At approximately midnight, just days ago, a Ukrainian signals intelligence station monitoring Russian military communications on the Eastern Front intercepted a transmission that would determine the fate of 200 Russian soldiers before any of them knew their lives were already measured in hours. The transmission was an operational order, encrypted, but using a cipher system that Ukrainian codebreakers had partially compromised weeks earlier. The decryption took less than an hour. By 0100 hours, the full content of the order was on the desk of a Ukrainian brigade commander, translated, analyzed, and annotated by intelligence officers who understood exactly what it meant. The order directed 2 Russian motorized rifle companies, approximately 200 personnel, supported by a platoon of tanks and a section of BMP infantry fighting vehicles, to launch an assault at 0600 hours along an eastern axis toward a Ukrainian defensive position that had resisted multiple Russian attacks over the preceding weeks. The order specified the assault timeline, the axis of advance, the fire support plan including preparatory artillery bombardment, the coordination signals, and the fallback positions in case the attack failed. It was, in every tactical sense, the complete Russian playbook for the operation, delivered to the Ukrainian defenders 6 hours before execution. 6 hours. In military terms, that is an eternity, and the Ukrainian brigade commander intended to use every minute of it. What happened between 0100 hours and 0600 hours, the frantic, disciplined, precisely choreographed transformation of a standard defensive position into a lethal trap, is a masterclass in tactical adaptation under pressure. And what happened after 0600 hours, when 200 Russian soldiers advanced into that trap, was one of the most devastating single-engagement defeats on this section of the front in recent months. The Ukrainian commander's first decision was counterintuitive. His instinct, and the instinct of every officer who receives advance warning of an enemy attack, was to reinforce the threatened position. Pour in more soldiers, more ammunition, more weapons. Make the defense stronger, but the commander rejected that approach. Reinforcing the position would absorb the Russian attack but would not destroy the attacking force. The Russians would hit a stronger defense, take casualties and fall back, battered but intact, ready to try again in days or weeks. Instead, the commander chose to build a kill zone. Not a defense designed to hold ground, but a trap designed to annihilate the attacker. The first step was deception. The Ukrainian position that the Russians intended to attack was a fortified strongpoint, trenches, bunkers, firing positions, obstacles that had been built up over weeks. It was a real position, manned by a real platoon. The commander ordered that platoon to remain in place, but to reduce its visible signature, pull back from the forward trenches, conceal heavy weapons, and create the appearance of a thinly held, vulnerable position. Dummy positions were quickly constructed. Mannequins in helmets placed in forward trenches, a deactivated machine gun mounted in a visible firing port, vehicle-shaped tarps stretched over wooden frames to simulate parked armor. From a distance, through binoculars or a drone camera, the position would look occupied but weak, exactly the kind of target that gives an attacking commander confidence. The second step was relocation. While the dummy positions were being prepared, the commander moved his actual combat power to the flanks. 2 reinforced platoons, each equipped with machine guns, anti-tank guided missiles, and large stockpiles of ammunition, were repositioned into concealed positions on the north and south sides of the expected Russian axis of advance. These flanking positions were dug in, camouflaged, and had clear fields of fire across the open ground that the Russian assault force would have to cross. The soldiers in these positions were told one thing: let the Russians pass your front. Do not fire until they are deep in the kill zone. Wait for the signal. Stay with this. The trap that was being built in those 6 hours had 4 layers, and the Russian assault force would hit every single one of them. The third step was mining. Ukrainian combat engineers, working in darkness with practiced speed, laid anti-tank and anti-personnel mines across the approaches to the Ukrainian position, not in the obvious locations where Russian mine clearance teams might check, but in the zones slightly behind the front edge of the assault, where the Russian vehicles and infantry would be when they were fully committed to the attack and unable to turn back. The mines were buried, covered and camouflaged in under 3 hours. The fourth step was fire coordination. The commander pre-registered his artillery, both tube artillery and a HIMARS battery on standby, on the open ground between the Russian assembly area and the Ukrainian position. He divided the kill zone into numbered sectors, each assigned to a specific artillery battery, so that fire could be called instantly onto any part of the engagement area by simply radioing a sector number. FPV drone teams were positioned with loaded aircraft, ready to launch the moment the engagement began. Sniper teams were embedded in concealed positions along the flanks, with orders to target Russian officers and radio operators, the men whose death would prevent the assault force from coordinating a response or calling for help. By 0500 hours, 1 hour before the Russian assault, every element was in place. The dummy positions faced east, looking vulnerable and inviting. The real combat power waited on the flanks, invisible and silent. The minefields lay beneath the frozen ground. The artillery was loaded and aimed. The drone teams were ready, and 200 Russian soldiers, assembling in their forward positions a kilometer to the east, had no idea that every step of their attack plan was known, anticipated, and prepared for. The Russian preparatory artillery bombardment began at 0545, 15 minutes before the assault, exactly as the intercepted order had specified. Russian guns pounded the Ukrainian position with high explosive shells, targeting the trenches, the bunkers, the firing positions, all of which were either empty or occupied only by mannequins and decoys. The Ukrainian soldiers in the real positions, tucked into their flanking hides, listened to the bombardment and waited. The shells fell on positions that no one was defending. The Russian artillery crews, watching the distant explosions, reported successful preparation of the target. At 0600 hours precisely, the Russian assault force moved. The first wave was armor, 4 tanks and 3 BMP infantry fighting vehicles, advancing in a loose wedge formation across the open ground toward the Ukrainian position. Behind them, Russian infantry moved in 2 company-sized formations, approximately 100 soldiers in each group, spread across a frontage of several hundred meters, some on foot, others riding on the exterior of the BMPs. The advance was textbook Russian doctrine: armored vehicles forward, infantry following, converging on the objective under the cover of continued artillery fire. From the flanking positions, Ukrainian observers watched through thermal optics and reported the Russian movement in real time. The brigade commander, monitoring the feed from his command post, tracked the assault force's progress across the kill zone. He waited. The Russian armor passed the first phase line, then the second. The infantry was now fully committed, too deep into the open ground to retreat quickly, too spread out to concentrate, too focused on the objective ahead to notice the concealed positions on their flanks. The commander gave the signal. What happened next lasted approximately 40 minutes. For the Russian soldiers caught in the kill zone, it must have felt like an eternity. The flanking positions opened fire simultaneously: machine guns, anti-tank guided missiles, and small arms from both the north and the south, pouring enfilade fire into the exposed sides of the Russian formation. The effect of flanking fire on an infantry force advancing in the open is catastrophic. Soldiers trained to face forward to seek cover from fire coming from the direction of their advance suddenly found themselves being hit from the sides, directions they had not fortified against. Directions they could not effectively return fire toward without exposing themselves to the fire from the other flank. Anti-tank missiles struck the lead tank and a BMP within the first 30 seconds. Both vehicles erupted in flames, blocking the advance of the vehicles behind them. A third tank attempted to pivot toward the northern flanking position and drove directly onto the minefield. The explosion blew the track off the vehicle, immobilizing it in the open. Its crew attempted to bail out and were engaged by Ukrainian snipers. The remaining armored vehicles, 2 tanks and 2 BMPs, found themselves in an impossible situation. Fire from both flanks, mines ahead, burning vehicles blocking retreat. The crews made different choices. One tank reversed at full speed and managed to clear the kill zone, the only Russian vehicle to escape the engagement intact. The others were disabled or destroyed within minutes by a combination of anti-tank missiles, FPV drones that swooped in from above, and artillery fire that the Ukrainian commander called on to the stalled vehicles with devastating precision. Which element of this trap was most decisive? A. The flanking positions. B. The minefields. C. The fake positions that drew the attack. D. The artillery coordination. Tell us in the comments. The Russian infantry suffered even worse. Caught in the open with fire pouring in from 3 directions, both flanks, and now the dummy positions at the front, where Ukrainian soldiers had unmanned the decoys and opened fire from real fighting positions behind them, the 200 Russian soldiers had nowhere to hide. Some hit the ground and tried to crawl toward the nearest cover. Some ran forward toward the Ukrainian position, perhaps hoping to get close enough that the flanking fire would cease. Some turned and ran back the way they came, directly through the artillery kill zones that Ukrainian guns were now systematically saturating with cluster munitions and high explosive rounds. FPV drone teams added another layer of devastation. Small kamikaze drones dove into clusters of Russian soldiers who had grouped together behind disabled vehicles or in shallow depressions in the ground. The instinctive clustering behavior of soldiers under fire that makes them perfect targets for precision munitions. Ukrainian sniper teams picked off Russian soldiers who attempted to use radios. Each fallen radio operator further isolating the survivors from any possibility of calling for reinforcement or coordinating a withdrawal. The engagement lasted approximately 40 minutes from the first shot to the last significant Russian resistance. By 0640, the kill zone was littered with burning vehicles, abandoned equipment, and the bodies of Russian soldiers who had walked into the most precisely engineered ambush of their war. The aftermath was as telling as the battle itself. Ukrainian infantry teams, supported by FPV drones providing aerial overwatch, swept the kill zone methodically. They moved vehicle to vehicle, position to position, securing wounded Russian soldiers, collecting abandoned weapons, and cataloging the destruction. The professionalism of the sweep reflected the same discipline that characterized the entire operation. No rushing, no chaos, no unnecessary risk. Among the captured Russian soldiers were several who provided immediate tactical intelligence during initial questioning. They confirmed what Ukrainian analysts had already suspected. The assault had been planned at battalion level, the soldiers had been briefed just hours before the attack, and none of them had been told that their communications might be compromised. Several captured soldiers expressed bewilderment at how completely the Ukrainians had been prepared. They had been told that the preparatory artillery bombardment would suppress the Ukrainian position and that the assault would encounter weakened resistance. Instead, they had walked into coordinated fire from 3 directions and had been unable to even identify where most of it was coming from. One captured Russian sergeant, according to Ukrainian intelligence reports, stated that from the moment the flanking fire opened, the assault force lost all cohesion within 60 seconds. Soldiers stopped following orders, stopped communicating, and simply tried to survive individually. There was no organized withdrawal because there was no one left to organize one. The platoon leaders and company commanders had been among the first casualties, targeted by Ukrainian snipers who had been specifically briefed to identify and eliminate leaders and radio operators. The captured weapons and equipment were significant. Assault rifles, machine guns, RPG launchers with unused rounds, anti-tank missiles, radios, night vision devices, and personal equipment from over 24 Russian soldiers. This material was collected, inventoried, and redistributed to Ukrainian units, Russian-manufactured weapons turned against the army that had carried them into Ukraine. Look at the timeline. 6 hours from intercepted order to completed trap. 40 minutes from first contact to total destruction. 200 Russian soldiers entered the kill zone. Confirmed battlefield reports, verified through drone surveillance footage, and intercepted Russian casualty communications indicate that approximately 130 to 140 Russian soldiers were killed or seriously wounded in the engagement, a casualty rate of approximately 70%. An additional 20 to 30 were captured by Ukrainian forces who swept the kill zone after the fighting ended. Fewer than 40 Russian soldiers from the assault force made it back to Russian lines, many of them wounded, all of them in shock. How many tanks and armored vehicles entered the kill zone? 7. How many escaped? 1. 6 Russian armored vehicles destroyed or abandoned in 40 minutes. Is the Russian military's reliance on predictable assault tactics a failure of doctrine, a failure of imagination, or a failure of leadership? Your thoughts in the comments. Now the economics of the perfect ambush. The 6 destroyed or abandoned armored vehicles, 4 tanks and 2 BMPs, plus 1 additional BMP damaged, represent a significant financial loss. The tanks, likely T-72B3 variants, carry a replacement value of approximately $1 to $1.5 million each. The BMPs cost approximately $500 to $800,000 each. Total armored vehicle losses, $5 to $8 million. The personnel losses are the heaviest cost. 130 to 140 Russian soldiers killed or seriously wounded, plus 20 to 30 captured. At an average training and equipping cost of $30,000 to $50,000 per soldier, the personnel loss represents approximately $6 to $10 million. The captured soldiers additionally provide Ukrainian intelligence with information about Russian force composition, morale, and operational plans. Intelligence value that is difficult to quantify but operationally significant. The wasted preparatory artillery bombardment, Russian shells fired at empty positions and mannequins, consumed ammunition worth an estimated $300,000 to $500,000. Ammunition that was manufactured in Russian factories running triple shifts, transported across thousands of kilometers of Russian rail network, and delivered to the front at enormous logistical cost, only to be fired at dummies. The failed assault's broader costs include the operational planning investment wasted, the demoralization effect on surviving Russian soldiers in the sector, and the tactical consequence of having lost 2 complete companies' worth of infantry and a platoon of armor in a single engagement. The Russian formation that launched the attack would require weeks to receive replacement personnel and equipment, weeks during which the sector would be undermanned and vulnerable. Total estimated Russian losses: armored vehicles, 6 destroyed or abandoned, $5 to $8 million. Personnel casualties, killed, wounded, captured, $6 to $10 million. Wasted artillery ammunition, $300,000 to $500,000. Operational planning and preparation costs wasted, estimated $1 to $2 million. Replacement and reconstitution costs, estimated $3 to $5 million. Total, $15 to $26 million. The cost of the Ukrainian operation, the mines laid, the ammunition expended, the FPV drones used, the artillery shells fired, and the HIMARS rockets launched, is estimated at approximately $1 to $2 million. Add the intelligence infrastructure costs, and the total Ukrainian expenditure is approximately $2 to $3 million. $3 million to destroy $26 million in Russian assets and annihilate an assault force of 200 soldiers, a cost-exchange ratio of approximately 9 to 1. And the strategic value, a Russian assault operation that had been planned for weeks, that was supposed to break through a stubborn Ukrainian position, turned into the worst single-day loss for the Russian formation in months, is worth far more than any dollar figure. If facts like these shatter the myth of Russian military competence, type truth in the comments. What would you have done differently if you were the Ukrainian commander? Tell us below. The Russian formation attempted no further assaults on this section of the front for the remainder of the week. The surviving soldiers, those who made it back from the kill zone, and those who witnessed the aftermath, spread accounts of the ambush through the Russian ranks. Intercepted communications revealed that Russian soldiers in adjacent sectors were openly questioning the competence of their own command, asking how the Ukrainians had known the exact plan, and expressing fear that their own upcoming operations were equally compromised. That fear is justified. Ukrainian signals intelligence capabilities have grown continuously throughout this war, supported by Western technology, domestic innovation, and the accumulated experience of thousands of intercept operations. Every Russian transmission is a potential source of intelligence. Every Russian order is a potential preview of an operation that Ukrainian defenders can prepare for. And every Russian commander who transmits an assault plan over a communications network that may already be compromised is gambling with the lives of his soldiers. The Ukrainian soldiers who built and executed the trap, the engineers who laid the mines, the infantry who waited in the flanking positions, the artillerymen who fired on cue, the drone operators who hunted stragglers, the snipers who silenced Russian radios, these men and women represent the defining advantage that Ukraine holds in this war. Not just better weapons or better technology, but better thinking. The ability to receive information, analyze it instantly, and transform a defensive position into a lethal trap in 6 hours. That is the product of training, experience, trust, and the motivation that comes from defending your own land against an invader. Russia can send more soldiers. Russia can plan more assaults. Russia can issue more orders over compromised communications networks, and Ukraine will be listening, and preparing, and waiting. 3 questions before you go. First, if Ukrainian signals intelligence can intercept and decrypt a Russian assault order 6 hours before execution, enabling the complete destruction of the attacking force, how many other Russian operations have been compromised in the same way without Moscow ever knowing the real reason they failed? Second, the Russian soldiers who walked into this trap were following orders that their own command had transmitted to the enemy. At what point do Russian soldiers begin to question whether their commander's plans are worth following? And what happens to an army where the troops no longer trust the orders they receive? Third, 6 hours was enough for Ukrainian defenders to transform a standard position into a perfect kill zone. If Ukrainian intelligence capabilities continue to improve, how much advance warning will they have for the next Russian assault? 12 hours? 24? And what kind of trap can be built with that much time? Think about that. Subscribe to Steel Command. Share this video. Russia keeps writing orders. Ukraine keeps reading them. And every Russian assault plan that crosses a compromised radio wave is another 200 soldiers walking toward a trap they cannot see. The world needs to understand this.